A lot of movies and TV shows get canceled for a very simple and boring reason. Not enough people were interested. But sometimes things are much, much weirder.
After the original Superman franchise perished in a ball of nuclear fire, executives were in a quandary as to how best to rekindle the Man of Steel's cinematic mojo. Apparently, in the 90s, infamous producer Jon Peters had commissioned a couple of different drafts of a script entitled Superman Reborn. The second draft was actually welcomed by Warner execs until it fell into the hands of Kevin Smith, then just a comic fan with only 3 features to his name. Smith apparently rewrote the script completely, turning in a draft called Superman Lives. Supposedly, it reads a whole lot like today's Marvel blockbusters while adhering to Peter's mandate that there be no stupid suit and no flying. Oh, and Superman had to fight a giant spider in the end. After a second draft, none other than Tim Burton came on board to direct, with Nicolas Cage set to star, at which point Peters promptly trashed Smith's script. After several more rewrites, Burton got bored, Peters got his giant spider plugged into the end of Wild Wild West, and Superman Lives died. However, we did get one beautifully strange picture of Nicolas Cage as Superman from the canceled project. Still, it's not exactly snakeskin.
My snakeskin jacket! Thanks, baby! Did I ever tell you that this here jacket represents a symbol of my individuality and my belief in personal freedom?
10 Things I Hate About You helped to bolster the movie star credentials of Heath Ledger and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and earned its place in the hearts of viewers with its wry humor and ultra-90s soundtrack. In 2012, at pretty much precisely the moment the film's target audience started to become capable of nostalgia, a belated sequel called 10 Things I Hate About Life went into production and then suddenly vanished. After several weeks of filming in late 2012, production halted for reasons that are completely unclear and just never started again. A lawsuit filed by the film's production company accused star Evan Rachel Wood of changing her mind about finishing the film during the break in production, while Wood insisted that the producers had run out of money and needed a scapegoat. Much like the film's production, the litigation seems to have simply petered out, and 10 Things fans were left in the lurch with nothing but a trailer. After shelling out $1 million for the script in 2005 and attaching Peter Jackson as producer and the then-unknown Neil Blomkamp as director, Microsoft mounted the most ill-advised pitch for a Halo movie that they possibly could have. They delivered copies of the script to unimpressed studio execs via hired actors in Master Chief costumes. Oh, and Microsoft's terms included full creative control and as big a budget as they wanted. Interested parties had 24 hours to decide.
That is, unless, of course, you pay me $100 billion.
Nearly every studio passed immediately, with Fox and Universal agreeing to partner up. But more problems ensued. Microsoft's continuing inability to speak Hollywoodese frustrated executives, and studio head Tom Rothman hated Blomkamp. After several months and millions of dollars in pre-production, Universal demanded that the producers make budget cuts. The producers said no, and Halo bit the dust. According to one involved party, Microsoft's unwillingness to reduce their deal killed it. It got too top-heavy. The movie could have been Avatar. Perhaps no author has proved more unadaptable than H.P. Lovecraft, the writer who gave the world most of the Cthulhu mythos. But if anybody was qualified to bring one of the pioneering author's most seminal works to the screen, it would be director Guillermo del Toro. Despite the challenging nature of the material, del Toro was ready to let cinematic deity James Cameron produce and Tom Cruise star in order to get a proper adaptation of the famous story on film. Unfortunately, the project fell apart over one point of contention: the rating. While they didn't blink at the proposed $150 million budget, Universal simply couldn't abide an R rating for the movie. As Del Toro told Collider, "We thought we had a very good, safe package. The R was what made it. If Mountains had been PG-13 or I had said PG-13, I'm too much of a Boy Scout. I should have lied, but I didn't." Before Samuel L. Jackson gave the world the version of Nick Fury that we all know today, George Clooney was in talks to star in a Nick Fury movie. Now, today it's really hard to imagine anyone but Jackson as Nick Fury, but Clooney did sort of fit with the older white version of Nick Fury from the comics. However, according to Business Insider, at some point Clooney picked up an issue from the 2001 comic series written by Garth Ennis and was forever put off the idea of playing Nick Fury. That was enough to derail everyone's movie aspirations. Clooney thought the gratuitously violent comics might translate into a gratuitously violent film, and he evidently didn't think that was a smart career move. However, we so far haven't seen Samuel L. Jackson do anything close to the grotesque violence of the 2001 comic series, so Clooney's decision might have been a little hasty. Although in Clooney's defense, we suppose anyone would be a little gun-shy when his career took a hit after appearing in Batman and Robin. After all, you know what they say about Hollywood.
It's a cold town.
It's hard to imagine, but there was a time when the great Steven Spielberg didn't know much about making movies. Way back in 1967, toward the start of Spielberg's career, he worked on a short film named Slipstream, which Empire called a tale about adrenaline junkie bicycle racers designed as an exercise in directorial showmanship. Spielberg worked on the film over the course of a few weekends, but then ran out of money. That's because he figured on being able to make the film for around $5,000, which frankly sounds insane even in 1967 dollars. Granted, Slipstream was supposed to be a short film, but in the mid-1960s, the average feature-length movie was 127 minutes long and cost around $1.5 million. $5,000 for a short film seems a little optimistic, especially considering that in those days, the average movie cost about $12,000 per minute of film. That's not to say nothing good came of the experience. Without Slipstream, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Empire of the Sun, and The Color Purple might have never been made. While searching for a cameraman for Slipstream, Spielberg was introduced to cinematographer Alan Daviau, who worked on all three of those future projects. If you are one of the many 80s kids who has fond memories of watching E.T. on the big screen, you've probably wondered at some point why they never made a sequel. Surely that heartwarming tale of a boy's friendship with a friendly alien would have inspired at least a follow-up movie or two. As it turns out, there actually was a sequel to E.T. in the works, and thank all the lords of Hollywood and everything that is good in the universe that it was never actually made. If it was, it would have shattered the innocence of every one of those 80s kids. Know what we're talking about?
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria!
The E.T. sequel was called Nocturnal Fears, and the plot was so ridiculous that one wonders whether Steven Spielberg was temporarily replaced by an actual alien when he was planning this freak show of a movie. According to Sci-Fi, the story included such suspenseful plot points as children being tortured and interrogated, and cattle being mutilated, because what's more creative than an alien movie in which humans are probed and cattle are mutilated? Thankfully, at some point, Spielberg came to his senses and canceled the project. You'll be shocked to hear that some movies don't get made because Hollywood egos get in the way. It's true, and it's not always the actors who suffer from massive egos. Directors do too, and sometimes the people who are providing the money decide to back way up when confronted with these creative egomaniacs. According to Empire, that's exactly what happened with Paul Verhoeven's Crusade, an epic story of violence, racism, and anti-Semitism, which some people described as part Spartacus, part Conan. Crusade was going to star Arnold Schwarzenegger, everyone's favorite governor and manly man, and it was far enough along that the sets had already been built in Spain and the actors had already signed. Then, in the final studio meeting, someone had the audacity to ask Verhoeven if he could guarantee that the film's expenditures wouldn't exceed $100 million, and he proceeded to lose his mind. Schwarzenegger told Empire that Verhoeven flew into a rant about how guarantees don't happen, which included some nonsensical stuff about getting hit by a truck and not believing in God. Schwarzenegger said he kept kicking the director under his chair to get him to shut up, but according to him, he just wouldn't, and that was it. That was the end of that movie. Maybe Arnold should have been a little less subtle. Before Star Wars, there was Star Trek. But while the latter might have come first, it's Star Wars that has dominated popular culture since its debut. The ironic thing? The original Star Trek motion picture actually got canceled because of Star Wars. Yes, it's crazy but true. According to Den of Geek, the original Star Trek movie had an insane series of possible plots bandied about on the way to the big screen. These included everything from a machine hurtling through space pretending to be God to a race of vengeful snake people to a black hole and some Mayans. The writers finally settled on a story called Planet of the Titans, which would have had the Greek Titans living on the edge of a black hole. But even after they settled on a story, the movie was plagued by casting difficulties, creative disagreements, and finally, a lack of vision about what fans might want. The film was originally set to film in 1976, but all these issues pushed it back to 1977, which is when Star Wars was set to hit theaters. And ultimately, all the pre-release buzz about Star Wars sealed the deal on the bizarre Star Trek movie. Some reportedly thought that Star Wars would flop, while others felt that either way, the market for science fiction wasn't big enough to support both franchises. Paramount chairman Barry Diller supposedly even said, "There's no future in science fiction." Nice call, Nostradamus.
Before the iconic 1988 movie The Naked Gun, there was its somewhat less iconic but still brilliant television ancestor Police Squad. Like Naked Gun and its two follow-up films, the show was a parody of 1960s police dramas starring the late Leslie Nielsen as the hilariously deadpan detective Frank Drebin. The humor was fast-paced and often visual, which is a pretty great formula for an audience sitting in a darkened movie theater watching a big screen. It didn't seem to work so well for the more distractible television audiences of the early 80s, however.
There'd been a recent wave of murders at the city zoo. I was bringing in a suspect when I got a call from headquarters about the kidnapping of Terry Burton.
When asked about the reason behind the decision to cancel Police Squad, network executive Tony Tomopoulos famously said the show was canceled because, quote, "the viewer had to watch it in order to appreciate it." A TV show you had to watch? Weird, right? What he meant, of course, was that the jokes moved so quickly that a casual viewer might miss something if they were having conversations, eating dinner, or doing anything else other than paying attention to the rapid-fire gags. That didn't stop critics from relentlessly dunking on his reasoning, though. TV Guide even went so far as to call his statements, quote, "the most stupid reason a network ever gave for ending a series." Considering some other reasons you're about to hear, that's saying something. Before Star Wars claimed the title of the greatest merchandising vehicle of all time, there was Batman, the unconventionally popular television series starring Adam West as the campy caped crusader and Burt Ward as the boy wonder. The 1966 series appealed to a huge audience. Kids loved the colorful superheroics of the dynamic duo, and adults caught on to the show's self-aware deadpan comedy. It was so popular that it had 2 episodes airing each week, with a cliffhanger leading from Wednesday night to the same bat time on Thursday, and racked up massive ratings and a list of Hollywood stars that wanted the dishonor of playing a special guest villain on a genuine pop culture phenomenon. Batman and Robin spent 3 years fighting crime on television and even starred in a feature-length theatrical film. But they couldn't save themselves from the most diabolical death trap of all, the network. ABC decided to kill the show halfway through its 3rd season, citing high production costs and falling ratings. Sounds normal enough, right? The story doesn't end there, though. In a twist right out of Batman's death-defying playbook, NBC was willing to pick the show up for a 4th season. Unfortunately, nobody told the guys with the bulldozers to wait a few weeks before destroying the elaborate and expensive sets. NBC balked at the idea of spending thousands of dollars on rebuilding the Batcave for a show with slipping ratings, and pow, that was the end of the dynamic duo. If only they'd asked millionaire philanthropist Bruce Wayne if he could spare a few bucks for the fight against crime, we might have gotten a 4th season. Fans of Joss Whedon's space western series Firefly are still mourning the early demise of their favorite show in 2002, and some are even still holding out for some kind of reprieve or revival nearly 2 decades later.
May have been the losing side. Still not convinced it was the wrong one.
That might seem more than a little obsessive, but it's also understandable given the circumstances. The demise of Firefly was a combination of different unfortunate factors, but from a distance, it almost looked as if network executives were maniacally conspiring to ensure its failure. They marketed it as a wacky genre comedy, which it definitely was not. They put it in a Friday night time slot that was infamous for a lack of viewers, and they inexplicably chose to air the episodes out of order, with the pilots, where all the major characters and their world were introduced, appearing last. While the show's small core group of fans stuck with the show through every considerable misstep, the rest of Firefly's viewers were baffled by the inconsistencies and disappointed that the wacky comedy they tuned in to see was actually a western reimagined as a sci-fi drama that dealt with some pretty dark themes. Sure, it had lots of jokes, but the stories about desperate criminals and space cannibals were definitely much darker than the viewers had been led to believe. The poor ratings were enough to convince Fox the show was a failure, and it declined to resurrect Firefly even after desperate fans organized a postcard writing campaign to plead for a stay of execution. Eventually, however, the completed first and only season of the show expanded its audience on DVD and streaming, and Whedon got the chance to tell more of the story in the 2005 feature film Serenity, which was largely possible because of all that fan enthusiasm. Millennials buy smartphones, baby boomers buy transistor radios, and no one sells transistor radios anymore. Or at least that was the logic behind the cancellation of Harry's Law, a smart crime drama starring Kathy Bates as a former patent lawyer turned criminal defense attorney. According to the LA Times, Harry's Law was NBC's second most watched drama of the 2011 to 2012 television season, ranking just behind SMASH and just above Law & Order SVU. How could 8.8 million viewers be wrong? Because they were 8.8 million older viewers. Yes, that's right. Harry's Law ended because advertisers didn't think they could sell enough stuff to Grandma.
Next thing I know, I'm broke and starving. I had no money, not even for food.
Despite winning an Emmy, the show didn't perform well with viewers aged 18 to 49, a lucrative demographic for advertisers, which left NBC network executives with a lot of difficulty in selling the show's advertising time. You'd think they could just shore things up with commercials for medical alert systems, Werther's Originals, and those jitterbug phones with the giant buttons, and at least get a little cash out of those 8.8 million. But no. Maybe it's for the best, though. Those companies tend to pay for airtime with crisp $5 bills folded up into birthday cards. Given his track record in children's television, you'd think any network targeting kids would let Paul Dini do pretty much whatever he wanted. After all, he'd worked on kid-friendly hits like Tiny Toon Adventures before becoming one of the showrunners behind Batman the Animated Series, where he co-created Harley Quinn and gave Warner Brothers one of its most popular and profitable new characters in decades. Unfortunately, Cartoon Network didn't want to take the chance, canceling his popular series Tower Prep after only 13 episodes. The reason? In a 2013 interview, Dini accused Cartoon Network of ending the live-action teen drama because it had too many girls, both on screen and probably as a result in the audience. Don't misunderstand, it's not that the network wanted Dini to leave out female characters altogether, it just wanted him to make sure that female characters were, as he put it, quote, one step behind the boys, not as smart as the boys, and not as interesting as the boys. So when Dini ignored this helpful advice and kept on writing some compelling backstories for his female characters, the show got the axe, frustrating fans even further by ending on a cliffhanger. So why exactly did Cartoon Network want to exclude half of Tower Prep's potential audience? Allegedly, they didn't think girls would buy enough merchandise to make it worth having prominent female characters who apparently need to be justified in order to exist. Because if there's one thing we know about teenage girls, it's that they never spend enough money to make someone ridiculously wealthy on genre stories that include women, right?
Are there by any chance any vampires in this book? Dark, brooding vampires? Who know they shouldn't fall in love with a mortal female, but do anyways?
Tower Prep wasn't the only victim of Cartoon Network's terrible decision-making. Just look at Adventure Time, one of Cartoon Network's most unexpected hits. It was the weirdly compelling story about a boy, a dog, and a bunch of people made out of candy or magic fire or lemons or cinnamon buns or space lumps. Either way, they had, well, adventures in a fantastic world of magic and mystery that was bright and fun and relentlessly charming, right up until it turned serious and hit its viewers right in the emotions.
This means someday you'll die. You know that, right?
I guess that'll be my last adventure.
As a result, the show didn't just appeal to the kids it was originally aimed at, it also got the attention of a huge audience of adult viewers. Great, right? Well, no. It turns out that kind of presented a problem for Cartoon Network. They couldn't move it into their grown-ups-only Adult Swim time slot for fear of losing their huge kid audience, but they couldn't monetize all of those adult viewers if they left it in the earlier time slot. To be fair, Adventure Time ran for a full 10 seasons and is unquestionably one of the most iconic cartoons of a generation. But in the end, it was canceled because it was just too popular with the wrong audience. You know when you were a kid and you were supposed to write a story for school, but you got a little too weird and couldn't think up a decent ending, so you just wrote, "And then she woke up," and it was all a dream? Dallas, an incredibly popular primetime soap opera, did that to an entire season in 1989. Swerving viewers with a twist so profoundly ridiculous that it could have easily come from the mind of a bored 10-year-old who didn't feel like finishing their homework. So why exactly did the show's writers decide that a grade school level plot device was the right way to wrap up their 9th season? Because back in season 8, star Patrick Duffy decided he was too big for Dallas. The writers sent him off with a bang, or rather a flip, killing his character after tumbling over a speeding car. A year later, he changed his mind. According to Duffy himself, he was asked to come back, but feel free to take that with a grain of salt. Either way, the producers came up with a spectacularly clever way to bring him back and just erased the entire 9th season by explaining it away as someone's dream, having Duffy's character show up in a shower like nothing had happened. The show limped ahead for a couple more seasons, but the damage had been done. Viewers just couldn't stomach the stupidity of the plot twist and the ratings never recovered. In early 2000, Fox decided to ride the reality show craze to success with some wildly over-the-top ideas, including the hugely popular special Who Wants to Marry a Multi-Millionaire? About, well, you can probably guess from the title. There were immediately plans for a sequel, but by February, Fox announced it was killing its plans to produce a follow-up because of some bad press about star Rick Rockwell. Namely, allegations that he was A, a jerk, B, a liar, and C, probably not actually a multimillionaire. Among Rockwell's transgressions was an accusation by a past girlfriend of physical abuse, which led to a restraining order. The real estate developer, failed stand-up comedian, and self-proclaimed motivational speaker also seemed to have lied about at least one part of his resume. Several venues he claimed to have a history with revealed that he had never actually performed for them.
My girlfriend left me. Just like, well, I'm a comedian. It's mandatory.
Perhaps most damning of all, it eventually came out that he wasn't really living the gold-plated lifestyle most of us associate with multimillionaires. His 1,200 square foot ranch home in California was pretty far from Beverly Hills, and the backyard was decorated with an old toilet. In case you're curious, the unlucky bride who won on the show, Darva Conger, had the marriage annulled just 7 weeks after exchanging vows, and you can't really blame her. Even if he actually had the piles of money that he claimed, which he didn't, the real treasure here was about 1 million red flags.